So, hi everyone. My name is Marisa Davis. I am founder and CEO of Tallawah Consulting, and we work with mission-driven brands to maximize their impact by using purpose, innovation, and inclusion to drive their core strategy forward. As part of our work, one of the things that I really see as important is being able to share examples and stories of those who are doing the work at the intersection of social impact and inclusion. And one of the ways in which we are doing that is through this inaugural series that I'm calling Tallawah Talks, where we feature a number of change makers who, in my mind, really embody what it means to be championing inclusive impact. I am so excited today that we have our first guest joining us, none other than Sara Minkara. And I am so happy that she's taken the time to chat with us today. And before we begin, Sara, I just want to give people a little intro, about who you are and why I think having you on here is such an awesome thing and a pleasure that we have today. So just a rough intro here of Sara. Sara Minkara, she's an internationally recognized champion for inclusion, leadership, individual empowerment, and social enterprise. She is the founder and CEO of Sara Minkara LLC. It's an organization that offers courses, workshops, executive coaching, and engages in public speaking opportunities to continue to bring her leading voice in the fields of disability, inclusion, empowerment, and authentic leadership to society. She has also founded Empowerment Through Integration, ETI, which provides social and life skills development for refugees and other children with disabilities. Has received a number of awards, not the least of which include Forbes 30 Under 30, Vital Voices, 100 Women Using Their Power to Empower, and most importantly, she's a proud Muslim first-generation American woman. And I am so happy, Sara, that you've taken the time to join us today. And I just want us to get into a conversation to just learn more about your journey as a social entrepreneur within this space.
Well, thank you so much, Marisa. And I'm so excited. I'm so honored just to be sitting and talking with you and being part of this series. So thank you.
Awesome. No, so happy to have you. So let's get started. So the first question is, what is social entrepreneurship to you?
Social entrepreneurship means to me is when, you have an enterprise that has a service or a product or a program that is addressing a need, filling a need, or, kind of working towards addressing a challenge within society with a social, underlying social mission. So it's an enterprise, but the most important aspect, or a really important aspect, is there is that business lens that, there's a supply and demand, and we are providing kind of services and programs and products to address this demand, but there needs to be a social mission or underlying social value to this whole enterprise.
No, awesome. And, the reason why I asked is because social entrepreneurship is one of those exciting buzzwords that people have been talking about for the last, I would say, 10, 15 years. And there's so many different definitions for what that means and represents to folks. So I am glad that you've offered us your take on what that means. And as a related bit, could you share with us a bit about just your own journey towards becoming a social entrepreneur? How did it begin, and what has that looked like?
Yeah, so it began. When I was actually in college, I founded my first social enterprise called Empowerment Integration, and focused on the empowerment and the inclusion of youth with disabilities through a variety of different programs that we've developed and we brought forward to different communities in countries like Lebanon. I never thought in a million years I would actually start a social enterprise, but for me, from a personal level, as someone who is blind, and really recognizing the problem that so many youth with disabilities are marginalized, pushed to the side, and not integrated, I decided to really work towards addressing that need through founding ATI. And it just became a big part of my life and my work, and I continued to growing it. And I think for me, I realized that, so now I started a new venture, but like the whole kind of aspect of really being able to create programs and services to really address the challenge within society is what really brought me forward in this world of social entrepreneurship.
So you started out like having no initial idea, I guess, or ambition to necessarily be a social entrepreneur, but it organically kind of went into that direction.
Yeah, it became a big part of my life, and it became actually a way of living, or a way of looking at life, and a way of thinking, right? And realizing that this world can be developing products and programs and services and so many things, and that's what companies do and what enterprises do, but why not have a social mission and social baseline to the work we do? And why not being able to, because that brings back value on a both smaller scale of the enterprise, but as a greater value on a societal level to all of us. Because the more that we are working, addressing, and being socially minded, we benefit in return. So that's why social entrepreneurship is an important kind of element to society, and to why I'm part of this kind of path.
Awesome. No, and I think the space of social entrepreneurship is certainly privileged to have you as part of it. And I guess it seemed like you touched on some of this even in your sharing of your journey thus far, but what would you say is the messy social problem that you're working to solve? And how are you going about solving it?
That's a good question. So right now I'm focusing on this whole concept of authentic inclusion, and the problem that we're working on trying to solve is there's so many efforts out there that talk about inclusion, and there's an issue of, how do we make sure that we're bringing forward everyone's true value and recognizing them and actually hearing them and seeing that value? It's not enough for people to have a seat at the table, and that's the first step, and then we need to make sure people have a seat at the table. But you might have a seat at the table, but you might not be comfortable bringing your true self forward because you're afraid of isms and assumptions, or you're not comfortable bringing one or more of our identities for different reasonings because you're uncomfortable, you don't feel like you belong, or you don't feel like you're valued. So how do we create spaces where you are comfortable bringing your authentic self forward? And in doing so, you're able to bring more of your true value, and in doing so, society benefits at large. So that's kind of what we're trying to address through our work, and we call it authentic inclusion, and we do that through trainings and workshops and coaching and courses and all these different types of products that we've developed that we bring forward to different spaces, whether it's corporations, NGOs, government spaces. I can go further, but that's kind of the premises of what I'm focusing on, and the messy problem that, to be honest, is not going to be addressed in one space or in one way or a switch of a button. It's a systemic issue of how we see one another and how we create assumptions and how we really prevent ourselves from bringing authenticity forward.
Right. And I mean, you mentioned this authentic leadership as what part of what you are bringing forward as a solution to this messy problem. Could you explain a bit more about what you are defining as authentic leadership and how that's shown up in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I truly believe all of us can be bringing forward this concept of authentic leadership. It's twofold. is on one hand, recognizing, and taking a step back and reflecting, am I bringing my full self forward? If not, why not? And really reflecting on how can I bring more of myself forward? And then on the other hand, us as individuals really reflecting on what are the narratives that we're creating for others, and taking a step back and recognizing, why am I part of creating these narratives? And how can I instead create a narrative of authentic inclusion, a narrative where everyone can feel like they belong and they can contribute? And one way we can start being part of creating that narrative is that we approach one another with one assumption that this person has something beautiful to contribute. And if we approach every single person with that mindset, we are part of creating an empowering space that allows people to really slowly bring more of their true self forward. So ultimately, there's this concept that we really emphasize is curiosity through a lens of compassion. Be curious about yourself. Ask yourself, why am I behaving like this? What am I not bringing forward? Why? But also be compassionate, because we need to be compassionate to ourselves and we need to really understand, but apply that to others as well. Ask like Marisa, why, asking people like their true perspective and who they are, but through a lens of compassion, not assumptions. And we know when people are having assumptions when they're asking questions. So when we ask people and getting their voices out there through a lens of compassion, more of people's voice and authentic self comes forward. So that's what authentic leadership is. How can we apply curiosity through the lens of compassion on how we see ourselves and how we see others?
Great. And, I think the notion of curiosity and compassion are really important, I think, values or kind of characteristics to embody throughout, whether you're showing up in a professional setting or personal setting. I think generally those are good values to go by, right? But within this time of a lot of the conversation within the past few months have been around inclusion and diversity and equity, right? And ensuring that there is a place for a number of people who represent various dimensions of diversity, that they too have a seat at the table. Now, using this lens of curiosity and compassion, how do you think that works within like a professional setting and environment, for someone to use that to actually help to shape or shift the culture that they're in?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's a couple of things. One is, I think it's important right now, like, for instance, with what's the intensity of racism that we're facing, right? And intensity of a lot of other isms, right? And you do see a community, people coming up and trying to be allies and really trying to support, and like, yes, let's do a DNI efforts and all, and that's great. But I think there's a few things. One is recognizing that each and every single one of us have contributed to that narrative, right? Whether intentionally or not intentionally, whether consciously or subconsciously. And I think if we go to a company, and I think that's one of the things that we try to work with like employees, what is each and every single one of, what is the narrative that we're contributing? Because I might not be outwardly being racist, right? But I might be passive, or I might be quiet, or I might be whatever, or, there's certain narratives that we are contributing to. So I think having people really, but again, it's people coming to that on their own. And that's why curiosity through a lens of compassion is so powerful, is people really recognize it on their own. So to give an example, we do this Discovery in the Dark workshop where people, now we do them virtually, but where people are blindfolded and they come together and they cannot say their name, where they're from, work they do, educational backgrounds, and other labels, and they come together. And through a 2-hour-long workshop, people go through this amazing and transformative experience of getting to know, interacting, and opening up and communicating in a very different way. Because when we remove the lens of sight, you remove 85% of what you take in. So you remove so many assumptions. And you see on one hand how people are more comfortable in their skin and bringing forward. And then you take a step back and ask the question, why are you more comfortable? And why is this, what changed? And how do you still be comfortable in a sighted setting? Because we're not asking you to be blind. We want people to see, right? And on the other hand, people recognize what are the narratives they're creating, because when they're blindfolded, people start thinking about, oh my God, what is this person looking like? Or what is their facial expression? What is their body language? And they're trying to imagine that person. But the question is, why? Why are you not just listening to what that person's saying and taking it in? So when people start thinking about and recognize, oh my God, yes, I am part of that narrative because I'm trying to grasp in certain things, and the uncertainty is so uncomfortable and the unknown is so uncomfortable. So people start asking themselves questions and about their own behavior, right? And that's really powerful, because that's going to lead towards, and then we get them to really think about more than how do you take that towards policy making or culture development or organizational development and applying it in a more actualized way. But it's powerful when people on their own recognize their own, how they interact with isms, both on themselves and others.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think even having that lens, there are lots of different ways in which people are approaching offering remedies to creating a more equitable and inclusive world. And even just this way in which you're doing it is bringing us another lens of doing that. So I guess related to that, as we think about this social problem that you're trying to solve, right? And the way in which that you've been doing it, why do you think, or why do you find it necessary at this point in time to be one of the people helping to solve this problem?
There's a few different things, right? One with our current context here in the U.S. politically, and what's been the narrative for the past few years, and then also on top of it with COVID and going to virtual reality, and then also for me it has been a struggle, like, and it's a constant journey of, like, for me, bringing all of myself forward as a blind Muslim woman. There's ableism and Islamophobia and in sexism and all that kind of stuff. And I felt like, it is a privilege to actually be able to start this new venture. And I felt like through my experience and being vulnerable and open and authentic, and also through the Discovering the Dark workshop and being able to bring that forward to different spaces and work with different individuals and communities to apply this, can bring some sort of support or comfort or address a certain need and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Gotcha. No, awesome. And I guess, as just thinking more about just the journey that you've gone through towards being a social entrepreneur, there certainly have been a number of accomplishments or things that you're proud of, that have come your way. But I'm also curious to hear what's been, I guess, one of the hardest lessons that you've had to learn along this journey of being a social entrepreneur.
Good question. I think a few things. One is financial sustainability, right? That balance of the social baseline and then the business lens, how do you have that right balance is so important. And how do you, get funding, or in other ways investments, but funding that aligns with your mission, and aligns with how you're addressing the problem. Like, for instance, with an ETI, it would have been much easier if we said, we are going to, let's say, provide 1 million canes to 1 million blind and visually impaired youth, and there we go, right? And it's addressing a specific problem, and we probably would have gotten certain funders, because funders like tangible outcomes and and outcomes, exactly. But for me, I don't want to do something just because it could be easily scaled or easily just funded, but the problem at hand when it comes to disability inclusion, one small element, yes, maybe it's the tool of the white cane, but it's a bigger issue of stigma surrounding disability that's embraced by everyone within society. So you need to address the stigma, and you're not going to address it with a white cane. So it means that we're going to have to go deep and really think about the issue systemically and really address it in a really more intentional way. And that's not always attractive. And then also, we were so intentional in terms of when we got funding, or we're also selling our some of our programs, or we were not applying the charity lens. Come help us or help the blind. That is never a word we uttered, even though it would have been much easier for people to come in and say, okay, yes, I would love to help the blind, and like, I will give you, I'll invest in your company, or I'll invest, whatever it is. No, we were, because that will perpetuate the narrative around the stigma. So all of that being so true to your values and true to how the problem and how to address it, and really making sure that you're not just adding another organization onto the table, but you're actually trying to really work on addressing the problem, if that makes sense. So that's been and will be still a challenge. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think not just as a social entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a leader, like, these are key challenges, right? That are common challenges that folks have to navigate to try and figure out, okay, how do I create my space within this particular industry, within this landscape of work. But I think there's especially that challenge when you're in this social entrepreneurial space, where for some you're not quite a regular nonprofit and you're not quite a regular for-profit business. So I am sure that others hearing your story can certainly relate to that challenge as other social entrepreneurs within this space. Mm-hmm. So tell me, I asked you more of a challenge that you faced, or one of the hardest lessons that you've learned thus far. What would you say is something that you are really proud of, with the work that you've done to date, that you feel comfortable mentioning?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few things. There's from a very individual data points to bigger things, but like, for instance, I'm so proud of the impact that we've been able to create through both ETI and now with my current company. With ETI, we've had participants that went through some of our programs come back 10 years later as volunteers, but then also for the programs, and saying that because of ETI, they've been able to really move forward in their lives in a more empowered and inclusive way. And I think those anecdotes, those stories, is what makes it all worth it. I think also the kind of the partnerships that we've been able to build across. To give you an example, ETI within Lebanon, we've been able to build partnerships across different communities, from both the local community to the government level to also international government organizations like the UN, World Bank. And I think that for us, like, that shows the comprehensiveness and the holisticness of the work that we're trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. And then currently with the authentic inclusion kind of programs that we've been developing, just when it makes, even this has been a recent kind of venture, but we've been doing a lot of workshops and trainings with different clients, and just the impact that we see that people coming out of our workshops and how it's impacted them on an individual level and also organizational communal level is what really I'm very proud of. And that discovering the dark workshop is one of my greatest pride and joy, and how much it's been really it's been brought forward and creating some impact in different spaces.
Yeah, and actually, with your Discovering the Dark workshop, I mean, is this a workshop that you offer to just businesses or nonprofits, or
That's a good question.
Who do you offer this service to?
So we offer these workshops to a wide range of clients and partners. Yes, corporations is definitely one of them. We provide them to government agencies, international organizations like World Bank and UN, universities, nonprofits. So it's a wide range. To be honest, any space in any sector, it's very applicable to that, because when it comes to inclusion is part of every single space and community. So yeah.
Right.
So we've gone, and also globally. It's not even like we do a lot in the US, but we do also like globally as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, you are certainly right about that. It permeates many spaces all over. And, I think our conversation thus far has been chatting about you as a social entrepreneur, and the work that you have done to date. But I'm curious, I think behind the work that you do, is always a personal story, right? So there is Sara, the person. How would you say your personal upbringing or experiences have informed the way you show up as a leader, as a CEO? Any particular experiences you want to speak to?
Yeah. So for me, a really important kind of value that is important to me, but also I struggle with in terms of how. Okay, let me take a step back. So, as a blind person, having a disability has really allowed me to see the world in a different lens. My parents, my family really empowered me to really make sure that we saw our disability as a strength and our identity of a disability as a beautiful thing. And I think that has really impacted how I see disability, how I see the world through that lens. And so in managing, in leading a team, or in kind of the different priorities and moving forward with the different programs, empowerment is a really, really big lens that I apply. But then it's hard, like as a leader or when you're managing, you need to balance between empowerment and accountability, right? And finding that really good balance is really hard. You either sway to one side or the other side. So for me, that's something that I'm still trying to find, and I'm still trying to really apply, because as we were told, like, in order for change to happen, you need to create almost equilibrium or create disruption, right? And for me, like, that's what I want to do. But then I also want to come in and be like, protect, right? And then also empower. I don't know. So it's a hard balance across the front. Change is not easy. The work that we're both doing is not easy. So how do you do that with being comfortable with equilibrium, but then also being empowering to yourself and to the team? And yeah, so.
Right. No, absolutely. And there's definitely a lot to learn, in presenting, showing up as your authentic self, right? And like bringing the different parts of yourself and your personal experiences to the forefront in a way that really informs your work as a leader in a good way. So I guess my final question, we are operating here within this COVID reality, right? This pandemic. And a number of people, businesses have had to shift and pivot to respond to the reality in which we find ourselves. How has this reality changed or informed the way you do your work now? And do you see any of these changes, being something that you want to hold on to in the long run?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, a really big shift and change is that our Discovering the Dark, we had to make sure that our programs were being provided virtually. And in the beginning, I was like, wait, there's no way I can do Discovery in the Dark virtually. Like the whole blindfolded in person aspect is, that's how can you? And I had exactly, and I can't blindfold you virtually, but that's the beauty. Challenges forces you to innovate, and we've been able to actually replicate the experience virtually and in a different way, and it's been really beautiful and powerful. And I don't think, to be honest, last year when I used to talk to clients and they're like, oh, do you do this virtually? Like, because it would be great for us to do them, and I'm like, nope, we only do them in person. And now, because COVID forced my hand, I had to figure out how to do them virtually, and it's been great. I do miss the in person. I think in the future I would do hybrids. I would definitely do some virtual, and I would do some in person. I think the beauty behind virtual reality is now I do more in one day. Like I'm doing one in Rwanda, and then a couple hours later I'm doing one in New York, right? And so I think that's allowed for scalability much easier. I mean, I haven't traveled. I do miss traveling, but it's been much better for my body in some ways. But I do miss in person. I miss the energy that is done in person. So I think future would be more the hybrid aspect. Also, when I was building my team for this new venture, in the past, I would have said, no, I need to hire my VP who's based in the US or if not in Boston. But now, because of it, my VP is based in London. And that, for me, again, the COVID is what really shifted my mindset. So it shifted how I look at the team structure, the scale, how we're doing programs, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, awesome. I mean, you touched on a great point in terms of just sometimes innovation is born out of necessity, right? Yes. And you had to make that happen. And I think that there is a lot that many of us who are working to either launch or shape or shift our businesses during this time have to learn from just the way in which that even you have showed up to this challenge. So yeah, I mean, that roughly covers it on my end. I mean, is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we end?
No, I think this is great. And I think, this is really awesome. And these conversations are really important. So yeah, I think it's good on my end too.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Sara, for joining us. And for anyone who's interested in learning more about your work or where to follow you, what are the respective channels or websites that we can follow to learn more about your work?
So if definitely check out the website, saraminkara.com. And, and Sara Minkara _ for the social media. Definitely follow us. That would be awesome. And check out the work. And and if you're interested in bringing authentic inclusion to your work, just reach out. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sara. Thank you again for helping us kick off this inaugural series. Thank you again so much. And we look forward to continuing to follow you on your journey. So thanks again.
Of course, thank you.